Today I'm going to explain to you why Disco Elysium is such an amazing game, and if you've been iffy on it up to this point, why you should absolutely give the game a shot, enjoy it, love it, care for it. It deserves it. Again, like the video if you like it, subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified of new uploads. I'll see you on the other side of the video. All great designers work for years before they're recognized. Todd Howard, Hideo Kojima, that guy that made Flappy Bird. Flappy. I have a feeling Flappy Bird would be a much different game. Oh my God, so while I was editing this, I Googled Flappy Bird just to see what would come up, and I found this. Like some kid, I can't tell what language he's speaking, but in like 2014 put together a version of Flappy Bird. It's just flying penises, and it's awesome. The point is, these people were just dreamers with a vision before their games eventually found success. Some doubted their talents, others thought that they had potential, but maybe they needed to prove themselves first before they were taken seriously. But there was one common thread through all of them. These game designers needed to follow their guts and prove that the game they had in their heads was worth playing. Now, of course, some games are more revolutionary than others, and some ideas seem more reasonable than other ideas. For example, the elevator pitch for a game like Skyrim would be relatively straightforward. Create a game that is centered around adventure and gives the player access to a game world that's extremely vast and encourages the player to do whatever they want to do in whatever way they want to do it. It's a pitch that I think we could all get behind and agree would make for a good game. Even a game like Death Stranding, which was extremely polarizing on launch and even is to this day, has a straightforward pitch like this. We will play as a courier, exploring a vast open world post-apocalyptic map that takes the form of a reworked continental United States after a global breakdown in commerce, the economy, finance, and even the laws of nature itself. And you'll traverse this map and deliver packages between destinations. These elevator pitches may not appeal to everybody, but the pitches at the very least make sense at the outset. A game like Disco Elysium is a little different because the elevator pitch is far less compelling to the mass market. You will go through the game playing as a perpetually hungover alcoholic detective who is much more of a bumbling buffoon than he is a qualified law enforcement officer. And furthermore, there will be no combat or notable gameplay system for conflict beyond the dialogue system itself. For some gamers, specifically the ones familiar with graphic interactive novels like Doki Doki Literature Club, this may not seem like that outrageous of an idea or concept, but for the majority of players, especially those in the West, this simply doesn't seem like a compelling game idea. At least not at the outset. Almost every game you play nowadays has combat of some sort, usually centered around guns or swords or some combination thereof. And while there's probably a dialogue system of some sort, it's definitely not the central system in the game. Even some of the most memorable RPGs of recent history, such as The Witcher 3, use dialogue systems in congruity with their combat systems. But this seemingly bland and uninteresting elevator pitch just makes Disco Elysium's success all the more remarkable. It all started from an idea that was incredibly niche, but the game's developers grew that seed into a game that can appeal to everyone. Instead of just centering its gameplay experience around guns or hand-to-hand combat, it focused on the most relatable experience in existence: the human experience. Disco Elysium was originally conceived by a young man named Robert Kravitz. He's an author and a fan of Infinity Engineering role-playing games like Planetscape Torment and other such RPGs of the same era. If you listen to interviews with the guy, he also makes it clear that he's Estonian and has a deep, intense interest in Cold War conflicts and the politics that drove those conflicts. At the heart of that is an interest in telling stories with overarching themes of lost greatness possessed by those who came before. And you pick up on all of this as you play through his creation, Disco Elysium. Every building and even person that you encounter is a shadow of its former self. In some cases, you can even encounter actual shadows from the past which depict this phenomenon precisely. Everybody in this world is trying to figure out their new place within its altered reality. War has ravaged this land called Ravashal, and even though the soldiers have moved on for the most part, the destruction left in their wake remains, both in the architecture and levels and also in the minds of those who inhabited this land. Things are not what they once were. Furthermore, the entire world is crafted meticulously with unique and memorable characters. I remember vividly the first time that I met the character named The Pigs, her real name being Marianne Laplante. You find her on the docks, and she is someone who is totally out of her mind, yet she's sympathetic at the same time. Having been abandoned by her children and traumatized by the war, in addition to many other atrocities and difficulties in her life, she's somebody that you feel for, even if you do approach her with caution. And every character is like this, whether it be the kids that are throwing rocks at the body hanging in the tree, or the dice maker in the old abandoned office building above the bookstore. They're all unique in writing, tone, personality, and even voice acting. But it's not just the way the world has been built that's significant. The greatest trick that Disco Elysium has up its sleeve is how it has you interact with and interrogate the world. You see, you play as an alcoholic detective who's an abject failure in almost every aspect of his entire life. At the start of the game, you get to build this 43-year-old detective off of one of 3 broad archetypes. You can choose between thinker, sensitive, or physical. Or, of course, you can choose to make your own character from scratch. Furthermore, there are 4 primary abilities in the game: intellect, psyche, physique, and motorics. And each ability has 6 secondary skills, and all of these can be leveled up individually. In addition, the clothes and gear that you'll discover as you play through the game that you can equip and unequip at will all has an impact on these stats. And of course, there's also stat boosters like cigarettes that can offer temporary boosts for certain situations. As you play through the game, you'll unlock skill points, which you will use to level up each of these skills as you see fit. But the most interesting and perhaps unique element of this whole character creation system and gameplay design is how these skills affect your interactions, not just with other characters in the world, but with the world itself and the things that happen within it. Put simply, it's not just your choices that are defined by your build and approach to character creation, but it's the very perception of the world. Based on your build, you may or may not receive certain prompts or dialogue options, and you'll never be notified of this, you'll just not see them. Sometimes you won't receive information about given situations, not information given by other characters through dialogue, but information obtained through the player character's mind. In other words, leveling these individual skills up leads to them having an impact on dialogue, in a way offering their own perspectives of a given situation. For example, if you level up the drama skill, it will interject when you're having conversations with people or even just evaluating an object or a place out in the world. The skill represents the dramatic side of your psyche and usually has funny and predictably dramatic interpretations of what you see. Or there's the suggestions skill, which will interject in situations when you need to be convincing or get your way. Sometimes the advice offered by those thoughts is accurate and helpful, and other times it will lead you astray and could possibly result in a negative outcome. For example, in situations when you need to approach a problem academically and seriously, listening to a skill like drama in your mind is probably a bad idea. It'll encourage you to make the most dramatic decision of all instead of the most rational, academic, or serious one. And this is where the real magic of Disco Elysium lies. It took a concept that initially sounded bland and uninteresting and reworked it into something that is so profound. I can't think of another game that has made me think about my own thoughts this much. It took a concept that initially sounded bland and uninteresting and reworked it into something utterly profound. Instead of going the route of a typical RPG in the modern marketplace, that is to have a game with branching decisions and a story that's relatively interesting, but that is centered around combat, conflict, and violence, they took the route of making the game all about self-interrogation. In a bizarre way, the antagonist of Disco Elysium is the protagonist's mind. And I know that sounds like a pothead, trippy sort of evaluation, but it's real, and it is so good. While there are moments of conflict with other characters, to be sure, and even opportunities where you get violent with them, the overwhelming majority of conflict in this game takes place purely within the main character's mind. You will constantly be debating back and forth with your different thoughts and skills, trying to determine whether a character is lying to you, and if they are, why that may be the case. After all, they may just be in trouble and they're lying to you out of fear of retribution, or perhaps they're trying to protect you because they know that if they were truthful, it could lead to your doom, or any other potential explanation. It's almost impossible for me to clearly describe just how many permutations there are of every interaction in this game. One playthrough, you may be purely dramatic and also persuasive, with the skills to reflect that, being a drama queen and a manipulator to your core. And the next playthrough, you could be a raging lunatic who takes every single drug he can find and plays as irrationally as you could possibly imagine. And in both cases, the skills within the main character's mind needed to reflect the character's current psychological condition, and they needed to serve as lenses between your mind's eye and the world. And they pulled it off. It's truly fantastic. And as far as I'm aware, no other game has ever managed to so thoroughly filter its world through the player's choices. It's not that the things you do will have a future impact on the world. In other words, they won't change it in any significant way. Revachol is Revachol, and it's going to stay that way. Rather, what Disco Elysium does is it focuses on how your choices and build out fundamentally transform your perception of the world. It may seem like a small distinction, but it's much, much more significant the more you think about it. And I think it's why Disco Elysium feels so much more real than most of its contemporary RPGs. In the real world, it's unlikely that a small choice you make will have earth-shattering consequences that ripple throughout your immediate surroundings within the span of a few hours. Sure, you might expect consequences if you do something drastic, but something as small as consuming a cigarette will surely pass by with little to no impact on the world around you. So too, in Disco Elysium. But because that doesn't make for a very good video game with players expecting consequences from their actions, the developers found a way to make all of those little actions and decisions count, because they alter the way that the character navigates the world, and not the world itself. I seriously can't talk Disco Elysium up enough. I've tried to avoid major spoilers throughout the course of this video in case you have avoided the game to this point for some reason, but it really is best that you experience it yourself. If you've ever considered playing this game, you should just jump on it now. I truly cannot recommend it enough. Disco Elysium is a fantastic narrative experience from beginning to end, and even though it will take a little bit of time for people unfamiliar with its eccentricities to get into it, I still think it is worth trying and getting into, because if you get past that initial barrier to entry, you will end up having one of the most remarkable game experiences of your entire life. But that's it for me. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button. It really does help. And subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified of new uploads. Also, head down to the link tree in the description box to find every link to my social media. Maybe even click the Twitch link and join us over there. We might be live at this very moment while you're watching. Come over and say hi. But with that, I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe out there. I love you all very, very much. I appreciate you. See you in the next one.